Hey yo, I'm Coin Lex and I'm back with Deckademics DJ and Production School and Gear Supply. Today I have the DDJ-REV7 on the bench. Pioneer DJ's Rev line has introduced the battle style layout to mobile controllers, and in the case of the REV7, motorized jogs for the first time in Pioneer DJ gear history. Now, I've held off releasing this review for reasons I'll go into later. While that doesn't do this video any favors with the almighty algorithm, it has given me a chance to spend a lot of time with this machine in the studio and performing at shows. This is a fairly comprehensive look at the REV7 based on over 3 months of everyday use, hence the long run time. And yet, it's still not an exhaustive take. There are lots of REV7 videos by now, and you've probably watched most of them. But stick around and hopefully I'll be able to answer any remaining questions you have. There's a lot to unpack on this baby, so let's dive in. The REV7 is designed and priced for the professional DJ, and there are 2 major features that set it apart from previous Pioneer DJ controllers. One is the motorized platters, and the other is the layout. A lot of how you initially feel about the REV7 might come down to the new design, so let's start there. Battle style, or more appropriately, DJ Cash Money style, who learned it from DJ Grand Wizard Rane, is when the turntables are rotated 90 degrees counterclockwise. This creates unobstructed access to the forward-moving position of the playing record, and moves the tone arm further away from accidental contact. This also orients the pitch fader horizontally at the top instead of vertically at the right. And like looking at contemporary art, you may be thinking, well, so what? Anyone could have done that. To which the response is always, yeah, but they didn't. And unlike contemporary art, DJ Cash Money style was immediately appreciated in its time, and it revolutionized what DJs were doing with turntables, most notably in the battle scene. Traditional setups continued to hold sway with dance music DJs, mostly because they were afraid to touch the records and embrace change, but also because it gave unfettered access to ride the pitch fader for 7-minute-long trance blends, which were all but destined to fall out of sync on a pair of Club 1200s. When the technology went digital, however, CD turntables actually fixed much of the need to ride the faders because playback was digitally locked in time. And so the pitch fader position has been too, though its use, especially in a lot of dance music, has pretty much become set it and forget it. But hip-hop and open format DJs and pretty much any other turntable DJ that wanted to physically interact with their music, genre notwithstanding, has embraced battle style setup since the 80s. Vestax and Newmark each took stabs at creating turntable designs with this layout in mind, and some 30-odd years later, battle style has finally made its way to digital controllers. So what does this orientation mean for a controller that doesn't have a tone arm to contend with? Well, a couple things I think. For starters, there's already thousands of DJs that are used to this layout, so it's a no-brainer to them. And tone arm or otherwise, I'd argue that it's a more efficient design. By repositioning the pitch fader horizontally at the top, the work area below becomes free from obstruction and can now accommodate a larger jog wheel in the same space. It also does away with having Deck 1's pitch fader right next to the volume fader, which was always weird to me. I think these changes are visually and mechanically more fluid, making it easier to learn and build muscle memory for faster leveling up. And these efficiencies are gained, as far as I can tell, without any real loss to function or design elsewhere. I'm sure you'll let me know if you agree with me in the comments, but I'm having trouble thinking of a good argument in favor of the traditional placement in modern DJing, aside from being tradition maybe. Maybe you play a lot of unquantized music, I don't know. Well, anyway, below this perfectly positioned pitch fader is a tempo range button, a reset to 0 button, key lock, and sync control. To the right is a library control, and it shares the same encoder and asymmetric button layout as the S7 and S11, and has the same function and secondary shift layers between equipment as well. The same goes for the 3-button loop section and its secondary layers. There's also slip and sensor reverse buttons, as well as 2-button key control, where key shifting is the primary function and key sync is the shift layer function. This is the way it is on the XP2, but it's opposite on the 1000 SRT. I had mine remapped this way, so personally, I'm happy to see it like this here. And that brings us to Instant Scratch, a first-of-its-kind feature found only on the REV7. Functionally, it acts as a separate 4-button, 5-layer pad mode. And while that certainly isn't unique, Instant Scratch itself is. Pressing the button will instantly override anything playing on the deck and allow you to load one of 3 scratch phrases or a 2-bar instrumental drum loop. Slot 1 sounds like this. Slot 2 sounds like this. Slot 3 comes with some percussion perfect for drumming. Slot 4 is an 8-count loop that sounds as close to a lift of Friends by Houdini as you can get without having to pay royalties. I mean, it isn't, but you know, kinda is. That said, I do like the beat well enough, and there's a fine mix of short and long samples to cut up in the 3 phrases. Tempo control is locked to plus or minus 8 with Instant Scratch, and that's good. Obviously, 50% would be awesome. The Instant Scratch sounds are baked into the hardware, which means you can't load your own samples in there. While that might be a bummer, I wonder if that limitation is what allows for Instant Scratch to work computer-free. It may seem initially insignificant to some, but I've used the computer-free scratch function literally every day since getting the REV7. Press 3 buttons and you're scratching in seconds. This is cool. It should be pointed out there's a small gap of silence at the beginning of each sample, strangely enough. You'd think it'd be instant and start when and where you press it like a hot cue. It's small and largely insignificant, but interesting and noteworthy nonetheless. These 4 buttons can also trigger hot cues, save loops, scratch bank, or your sampler. You could probably remap it to trigger different things as well. Loop, roll, and beat jump are 2 that could be useful here. The other part of the battle style layout is having a battle style mixer, and in this case, there's a DJM S7 facsimile at the center of this rig. But the REV7 adds a host of different features and effects, so think of it more like an S7 Plus. Like the S7, the trim and filter pots flank the full kill EQ stack with an input selector above. The info screen is sharp, bright, easy to read, and shows the effect, synced BPM, beat length, and parameter level. The effects section is also similar to the S7. There's 3 buttons on each side with paddle switches and a depth level knob in the center, with shift below that, which is the same location as the S11. The REV7 has 22 hardware effects and Serato software effects. You can change the effect in each bank simply by holding the button and turning either library browse encoder. Hardware or software effect banks are selectable by holding shift and hitting echo or spin. Or you can mix and match and save your own combos in one of 2 banks selectable by hitting shift and break or duck down. Duck down is one of a few new effects that are found only on the REV7. The new effects are all different variants of the ubiquitous echo out effect. This is intentional, of course, since the echo is inarguably the most heavily used and abused effect / transition creator in open format DJing. Duck down is a really cool effect that transposes a semitone every iteration. Helix out is kind of the opposite of that, but different, kind of like a riser that increases in speed and pitch as it fades in volume. Time sweep echo is a fun, distorted dub style delay, and fill out is one that's both a fun way to transition out of a tune, as well as just add one of 7 different loop roll or Ableton beat repeat style fills anytime you want. Holding shift when you press these buttons changes different parameters for each effect, and in the case of fill out, allows you to select how long the pattern will play before fading away. Fill out also has a random mode, which chooses a new pattern every time you engage it, if you're brave enough. The REV7 has dedicated silent cue buttons. Next to them are pad mode parameter buttons. Primary and secondary pad modes are the same on the REV7 as they are on the S11 and S7, so muscle memory and routine performances perfectly translate between the setups. Unlike the S7 and S11, there are no custom pad modes here. Below the pads on the right is the standard monitoring section, though the REV7 now has split cue monitoring available in the Serato settings. On the left is the sampler volume pot, as well as another welcome feature previously only available on the S11. Because Pioneer DJ knows their target market so well, they've added yet another echo. Smooth echo is an entirely separate effect from the main effects section, and it's assignable to engage on one or all of 5 different triggers. To set those parameters, hold the button for a second and the REV7 utility menu will pop up on the left jog screen. Use the left library controls to change what triggers smooth echo, including the crossfader and channel faders, or by hitting hot cue, silent cue, or load buttons. You can change the echo and crossfader parameters as well as the overall depth level. I love smooth echo, and I miss it when I play on mixers that don't have it. While we're here, the REV7 utility, which is also accessible by holding the left side back button, gives you quick access to adjust a handful of things, most of which are for the microphone and audio output routing. Hold shift and press the smooth echo button to apply the effects from the main effects unit to the sampler output. Finishing out the mixer is the fader section, with what feels like a pair of S9 or S11 up faders for the channels. This is notable because in all the ways the mixer looks like an S7, it feels more like an S11. The crossfader is the ultra buttery Magvel Fader Pro. Well, it's supposed to be buttery anyway. The unit I got was the full friction edition, and it felt like the fader carriage was basically sanding the rails instead of riding them. So I did what any good reviewer does, and I broke out the screwdriver to take matters into my own hands. Pour one out for DJ Works. Inside, I found a well-engineered piece of equipment, actually. Circuit boards are encased in these metal sleeves, which will likely help localize any damage caused from liquid spills, God forbid. And while Pioneer DJ takes a fair amount of guff for having plastic-cased controllers, inside the REV7 is a metal frame that keeps everything rigid and braced. Lots of screws, cables, and sweaty palms later, and I was able to remove, clean, and lubricate the fader and Humpty Dumpty everything back together again. This was not how I wanted to start my relationship with the REV7, but this did restore the feeling of the Magvel Fader Pro that I love so much. A quick YouTube search reveals I am not the first to encounter the case of the crunchy crossfader, or in fact a few other issues, though I am probably the first idiot to crack a REV7 open in order to fix it. You can see the top rail from the outside, so just use a little of this lube with the tube if you can't be trusted with a screwdriver. Now, I've kind of held off releasing this video for a minute in order to keep my eye on issues people were having with the REV7. It's always difficult to gauge just how prevalent an issue might be with any piece of equipment when looking online, because most of the folks that don't have problems aren't posting about not having the problems. But people are posting about some problems. And in keeping it real, this unit and another that has come through our shop have also experienced problems which may require being returned. It seems like when people are having an issue, they're posting online fairly quick and painless customer service. In theory, I guess we just chalk this up to early production quality control issues, right? Moving up front is control for 2 microphones, including universal high-low tone control and an echo level knob, with further tailoring available in the utility. There's also fader curve controls and a crossfader feeling adjust knob. You've got 1/4" and 1/8" headphone outs, followed by the aux channel volume controls. Around back, you've got the usual XLR, RCA, and 1/4" outputs, dual USB ports, switchable phono line inputs and a grounding post, and 2 mic inputs with attenuation dials. Note the mic 1 is a balanced XLR 1/4" combo, and mic 2 is only a balanced 1/4. Internally, the REV7 uses the same sonic architecture as the S11, and the output is indiscernibly identical to my ears. Phono preamps are clean, and the overall sound has that clear and punchy Pioneer DJ timbre we've come to expect. The REV7 is powered by a hefty external brick, which is never really ideal from a user's perspective, though I'm sure this all comes down to some combination of important factors like overall size and weight and internal heat and audio fidelity, yada yada. Practically, this just means you should have at least one backup power supply if you plan on leaving the house with it. Prion Jani has made a video looking at a couple third-party power supply options, and I can confirm the slimline option he presents is a good choice, so give that a look. And now, can we just take a second? Look at them go. Wow, they said it wouldn't be done. Nobody thought Pioneer DJ would give us motorized platters, but here they are. Pioneer DJ calls them vinylized jog wheels, actually, and honestly, the overall feel of them is perfectly encapsulated by that vinylized jog wheel term. Touching and moving it feels a lot like the jog on a CDJ-3000. Adding the motor brings it to life though, and lifelong turntable users will want to take a few minutes and recalibrate to the very similar and yet ever so slightly different feeling. It does feel really good though. The platter edge is embossed with the familiar strobe dot pattern, though there's no light to reference your speed. The record has an etched acrylic top with a clear center showcasing a full color display underneath. If we lift the record by gently pulling up along the edge, we can see this is accomplished in a pretty brilliant way. The record bottom has posts that seat and click inside this gray inner ring. This ring is the playhead, and it lightly yet firmly rests against the platter. If I hold the playhead, you can see the platter is free to spin independently, and playback resumes through tension the moment I let it go. Pretty slick stuff. Speaking of, you can adjust the slipperiness of each record on the platter with the supplied slip sheets. 2 come installed under each record, and removing one provides a slightly faster feeling experience. I experimented a lot with using 1 or 2 sheets in combination with adjusting the motor torque level in the utility menu, and I settled on using both slip sheets with the motor torque set on low. In an attempt to find my perfect feeling combo, I cut up a pair of standard thickness felt slip mats, as well as a pair of butter rugs, which are my preferred slip mats when using turntables. Now, don't go cutting up your felt mats just yet because they're way too thick, but the butter rugs feel good under there, and they're at least as good and maybe better feeling than the supplied slips. I imagine people are going to experiment here, and I've already seen some aftermarket mats hit the market as well. In addition to customizing how the jogs feel, you can customize how the jogs look with 4 different display modes selectable by holding shift and hitting the RPM buttons. This is obviously also not like a turntable, but that's good because having a screen is better. It's the best of both worlds, kind of like the ethos behind that whole vinylized jog wheel thing. The screens mean you can return a lot of your attention back to the gear in front of you instead of staring at your laptop. Waveform mode is exactly what the name would indicate and cleverly shows both channels in each display, including additional tempo, track timing, and loop information. Virtual deck mode ditches the waveform in favor of even more on-screen information, including a key shift number, slip status, and a subdivided hot cue indicator ring. There's also an album art display mode and a logo display mode. When you set up your REV7, it will include an image transfer utility that will allow you to upload your logo or any image for that matter. In a perfect world, the screens would also show your library as you scroll through it, as well as display the changes made when using the EQ colored waveforms. I suspect those things come with a substantial processing draw, which may be why the latter isn't even available on the S11. You can also choose to show a digital playhead marker on the screen by double tapping the 33 button. This marker acts like it always has, which means resetting the visual position on the screen when 2 cue points are close together. This playhead repositioning can add a lot of confusion when trying to pull off tricks, so Pioneer DJ has included some physical stickers that can be applied to the record top to act just like a marked piece of vinyl. I've seen concern expressed for the fragility of the record and what might happen if one was accidentally dropped or incorrectly forced back on the platter. And after watching some folks on YouTube already manhandle these things, I suspect we won't have to wait too long for our first durability check. That said, I haven't seen anybody break one yet, though some of y'all have certainly tried. There's a notch back here. Use the sticker to mark it. Be gentle and go slow. Those are actually wise words for playing an opening set too, so write that down. Free game. The player sections are identical and equipped with a stop time knob, which is unfortunately not a tool to Donnie Darko your way out of a clang in your mix. It'd be a lot cooler if it was. I was initially really excited to see 33 and 45 RPM external control, but that faded quickly when I realized that doesn't do much for the universal RPM selection in Serato DJ. See, back in the Scratch Live days, each Serato deck had independent speed selection in the software, which meant you could do tempo transitions up or down using these and the turntable RPM buttons. This was a way to overcome the plus or minus 8% pitch range on a 1200. Now, lots of decks, including the REV7 and the Serato DJ software itself, have a pitch range of plus or minus 50, so this sketchy trick is no longer very useful. In my mind, that makes these buttons kinda not useful as well, at least not in such a prominent place. And they're hardwired to control the motor, so there's no remapping that away. If you're changing motor speeds multiple times in a set, please let me know why you're doing that in the comments. Perhaps I'm missing something. And speaking of motors, the ones found inside the REV7 are actually quite special. See, all the direct drive motors that have appeared on DJ turntables that weren't branded Technics have been one of two makers. One is the Yahorn motor, if I'm saying that right, and that's what Rane, Newmark, Denon, all the in-music brands use for their motorized platters. The other is the handpin motor, which has been used in the Stanton 150s, the RP8000, as well as the PLX 1000. Manufacturers have been using these two companies because developing direct drive technology is cost prohibitively expensive. And aside from Technics, those two are the only other game in town. But these motors here, these right here, in the REV7, these were created entirely in-house with a proprietary design for and by Pioneer DJ. Now, just think about that for a second, because the implications you can draw from that are pretty huge. I mean, they wouldn't just put all that R&D, time, and money just to use the technology once in the REV7, now would they? Well, back up here are a pair of pitch bend buttons that operate more like a nudge, which means instead of holding the button down to catch a track up, here you tap it. Holding does nothing. It's a nice alternative to touching the platters, and should suffice for those who are used to making corrections on the spindle. If you're used to dragging the platter edge, do spend some time trying the two torque settings. The high torque felt like a PLX or an RP8000 to me, where the low torque felt more like a 1200. Once I dialed that and the slip mat slipperiness in, for me it turned a really good feeling experience into a great one. But no gear is perfect, of course. When I review the equipment on this channel, I'm always trying to consider the real-world effects that are the result of the product's design. And here, I see two potential liabilities for your mix. First is the proximity of the 45 RPM button to the start-stop button, less than a pinky apart. I've unintentionally hit the 45 more than a couple times when coming in hot. Now, some of that is just learning the board, but I'm absolutely sure it means at least a couple of you are likely to blow a mix at some point by meaning to hit the stop and accidentally hitting 45 instead. I do think this is relatively minor. The more major one might be up here, where the instant scratch and auto loop buttons are the same size and basically same location, with exactly opposite results when you engage them. Pioneer DJ seems to have thought of this, and everything is color-coded with good intention. However, 2 a.m. rolls around, you're 4 hours deep on a 5-hour set with all that entails, and you make the last-second decision to hit a loop, but accidentally hit the instant scratch instead. Well, now you've pooped the bed. It's important to say that a large percentage of users will never have this happen, but a few of you inevitably will. In no way are these deal breakers to me, but knowing they exist will make you more careful, and now you're less likely to do it. Okay, so here's 2 quick pro tips. First is to understand the machinery. Unlike a static platter, it takes a moment for the motorized platter to reach the appropriate speed from a dead stop. With the Serato DJ internal start time set at 0, the REV7 will compensate for this. But if you hit start while holding the platter, like you might do if you're coming from turntables, you'll notice the beginning of the song will still play, which isn't a problem, unless of course your fader is up. You can fix this by increasing the internal start time just a little. Also, secondly, while you're in the Serato DJ menu, turn off anti-drift. Seems counterintuitive, but this is the way. As a whole, I think the greatest thing about the REV7 is it's just really fun to DJ with. I've had it set up in the studio every day, and it has been a blast putting it through the paces. It's both interestingly novel and comfortingly traditional, and that just makes for a really good time. And after all, that's really what this whole thing is about in the first place. I think Pioneer DJ has a very specific target market in mind for the Rev line of controllers. These are aimed at current or future Serato users that like using turntables. The CDJ and 900 mixer is more your cup of tea. Basically, all the controllers that aren't the Rev are made with you in mind. They designed the REV7 not to fundamentally change the game, but to provide the fundamentals that thousands of DJs are already used to, but hadn't yet found in another controller. Of course, I know about the Rane One, and the Rane's cool. It just wasn't it. You know what it is, right? It is the elusive DJ product that all these companies have yet to create. The one that will finally get the turntable heads to consider something else. I think it's safe to say that most of those heads are of my DJ generation and before. And for one reason or 1,000, previous motorized controllers just haven't quite connected with that rather large segment of what I presume is mostly the US market. Over here, lots of DJs are still lugging turntables around to every gig. And they do it for a few reasons. First, it just looks cooler. I don't think that's debatable. A second reason comes in the form of a calculated risk assessment, because problems can arise with any gear at any time, but if you're using separate pieces, then you just use a single deck or swap the mixer out and keep it moving. Not so with an all-in-one controller. It's just a limitation of the format. I think the most important reason is that they haven't yet found a replacement that accurately translates the fun and the full-size physical feeling that comes from DJing with turntables and a mixer. Most of the DJs in this market have been playing for over a decade. Many have multiple decades in the game. And they're used to the dance that comes with DJing with motorized decks. The players are as much of a partner in getting the tunes out as the hands are that's controlling it. It's like a two to tango experience that, in my opinion, just doesn't exist with a static platter. And all these old heads are just looking for a dance partner, baby. Should go without saying, but I know I have to. I'm not claiming that static platters are worse, only that they're very different. If you've only used moving platters, static platters can feel sluggish and boring. And if you've only used static platters, then active platters can add a whole new level of anxiety to your performance until you figure it out. It's all about what you're comfortable with, or what you want to be comfortable with. The REV7 doesn't exactly feel like a record on a turntable platter. That's where the NS7 and Rane One show up, and they do it really, really well. But the players were never the problem with those controllers. The problem has always been their mixer. The REV7 pairs two great feeling motorized jogs with a nearly full-size mixer that's laid out just like the DJM S series, with the bonus of a more familiar and efficient pitch position. I've seen a lot of people voicing concerns about the loss of the spindle on the Rev platters, or that maybe they're too small. I'm of the personal opinion that the giant spindle systems take up a lot of real estate that's shared with your hand and make the experience, while still very fun, also very cramped. I don't feel cramped in the same way on the REV7. But that wouldn't be so if there wasn't also a full-size mixer in the middle. It makes a huge difference. The REV7 is a faithful yet updated and hybridized analog to the turntables and mixer setup lots of DJs are used to, with all the conveniences that come with a controller. Is this the it piece of DJ equipment I referenced earlier? I guess only time will tell, but why wouldn't it be? It ticks all the boxes. I find the players completely expressive and fun to use, and the mixer section here is only a ½ inch smaller in width than the S11, so it feels to you and looks to the crowd just like external gear. The REV7 was designed to scratch an itch, and I'll tell you, at least for me, it feels pretty good, man. Like the Rev One, I gotta cop this. They're a pretty hot commodity these days, and the supply chain issues are still impacting availability. So hit us up at Deckademics.com/shop and see what we have in stock. Or just call us up and we'll do our best to get you all the gear you need. You can follow me everywhere at CoolHandLex and follow the school and the shop at Deckademics. Let the algorithm know that you think what we're doing here is pretty swell by giving us a thumbs up, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. We're a small shop, so those things go a long way here. We appreciate you. As always, you can't download practice, so you better get to it. Peace.
Here we go.